Here's a funny thing about the word cow. Many people casually call all cattle cows. But technically, bulls are not cows, steers are not cows, and calves are definitely not cows. Farmers usually use very specific terms because every cattle animal has a different role, value, and purpose on the farm. Some produce milk, some produce beef, some are used for breeding, and some were once used to pull plows and wagons long before tractors existed. And once you understand the difference between cattle, cows, bulls, heifers, steers, and oxen, you start seeing the entire cattle industry very differently. So what actually makes a cow a cow? To understand that, we first need to clear up the difference between cow and cattle. One of the biggest mistakes people make is using the words cow and cattle as if they mean the exact same thing, but farmers do not use those words interchangeably. The word cattle, as the general term for the entire group or species, it includes bulls, cows, steers, heifers, and calves altogether. A cow, on the other hand, is actually a very specific type of cattle. Technically, a cow is an adult female cattle animal that has already had at least one calf. That means not every female cattle animal is automatically a cow. And male cattle are definitely not cows. But in everyday conversation, most people simply see cattle in a field and call all of them cows, even when the group contains bulls, calves, and steers. To farmers, though, those differences matter a lot because each type of cattle is managed differently and can have a completely different purpose on the farm. And once farmers start separating the males from the females, the terminology becomes even more specific. Bulls are adult male cattle used mainly for breeding. Compared to cows, bulls are usually larger, heavier, and far more muscular. Farmers carefully select breeding bulls because one bull can affect the genetics of an entire herd. A good bull can help produce calves that grow faster, stay healthier, or produce better beef. But bulls are also stronger and more difficult to handle than most other cattle, which is why farmers manage them carefully. And interestingly, not every male cattle animal stays a bull. Many are raised for a completely different purpose instead. Many people have heard the word steer, but a lot of people do not actually know what it means. A steer is a male cattle animal that has been castrated. Unlike bulls, steers are usually not used for breeding. Instead, they are commonly raised for beef production. Farmers often prefer steers for meat production because they are usually calmer, easier to manage, and less aggressive than bulls. That makes them better suited for feedlots, grazing systems, and large beef operations. In fact, a large percentage of beef sold in supermarkets comes from steers. So, while bulls are mainly valuable for genetics and breeding, steers are mainly valuable for producing beef efficiently. But male cattle are only part of the story. On the female side of the herd, farmers use another very important term that many people also confuse with cows: heifers. A heifer is a young female cattle animal that has not had a calf yet. This is one of the most commonly misunderstood cattle terms because many people simply call every female cattle animal a cow. But technically, a young female only becomes a cow after giving birth for the first time. Before that, she is called a heifer. Heifers are extremely important on both dairy and beef farms because they represent the future of the herd. Farmers carefully select the best heifers to become future milk producers, breeding animals, or replacement cattle for the farm. And before bulls, cows, or heifers become any of those things, they all begin the exact same way, as calves. A calf is simply a young cattle animal. Male calves are often called bull calves, while female calves are called heifer calves. This is the very beginning stage of a cattle animal's life, but it is also one of the most important stages for farmers. Healthy calves usually grow into healthier and more productive adult cattle later on. On dairy farms, some calves may eventually become future milk-producing cows. On beef farms, calves are often raised to become breeding animals or beef cattle, and depending on the farm, calves may be bottle-fed, raised by their mothers, or managed in special calf pens during the early months of life. But cattle were not always raised mainly for milk and beef. For thousands of years, people also depended on cattle for something completely different: physical labor. Long before modern tractors existed, farmers used cattle to power farms. These working cattle animals are called oxen. An ox is usually a trained male cattle animal used for pulling plows, wagons, logs, or heavy loads. In many cases, oxen were castrated males because they were often calmer and easier to train for work. For centuries, oxen helped farmers plow fields, transport supplies, and clear land in many parts of the world. In fact, before engines and farm machinery became common, oxen were some of the most important machines on a farm. And cattle are also divided into different scientific types, depending on where they evolved and how they adapted to the climate. Most modern cattle are usually grouped into two major scientific types: Bos taurus and Bos indicus. Bos taurus cattle are the cattle type most commonly associated with Europe and many Western beef and dairy breeds. These cattle are generally better suited for cooler climates and include many famous breeds used in modern beef and dairy farming. Bos indicus cattle, on the other hand, are more common in hot tropical regions. These cattle are known for features like loose skin, large ears, and a hump over their shoulders. They are often better adapted to heat, insects, drought, and harsh environments. One of the most famous examples is the Brahman cattle breed. Over time, farmers also created crossbred cattle. By combining traits from both types to improve heat tolerance, growth, milk production, or beef quality. And when you put all of this together, you start realizing that cattle terminology is much more than just random farm vocabulary. At first, words like bull, steer, heifer, calf, and ox might sound like complicated farm terminology. But for farmers, these terms are extremely important because each type of cattle serves a different purpose. Some animals are used for breeding. Some are raised mainly for beef. Some produce milk. And others were traditionally used for labor. These categories also affect how cattle are fed, managed, housed, and valued economically. A farmer can often identify an animal's role instantly just by looking at its age, sex, body shape, and behavior. That is why cattle producers rarely call every animal a cow. To them, those differences are part of how the entire cattle industry works. So the next time you see cattle standing in a field, you might stop calling all of them cows, because now you know farmers are actually looking at bulls, steers, heifers, calves, breeding animals, dairy cattle, beef cattle, and sometimes even living pieces of agricultural history. And if you enjoy learning about livestock, farming, and animal history, make sure to subscribe for more videos like this.